I'm Ryan Milliken from Hardway Performance, and you're listening to the Diesel Power Podcast.
This is Jaron Holder from Holderdown Performance.
This is Anthony Range from XDP.
I'm Dimitri Miller with No Zone Diesel.
I'm Drew with D&J Precision Machine.
I'm Pinky.
And you're listening to the Diesel Power Podcast.
Diesel Power Podcast.
Diesel Power Podcast.
And you're listening to the Diesel Power Podcast.
The one and only Diesel Power Podcast.
Hello, Diesel fans, and welcome to the official Diesel Power Podcast. This episode is brought to you by ATS Diesel Performance. If you're looking for upgrades for your Cummins Duramax or Power Stroke, and you want the parts built in the good old US of A, you need to check out ATS. They've got crate transmissions, rebuild kits, injection pump kits, turbo kits, exhaust manifolds, diff covers, pretty much anything that you'd want they have. Just go to atsdiesel.com, or you can give us a call at 888-556-0743. We'll get some parts headed your way. Our guest today is Dave from Pennsylvania. We came across his build page on Instagram, and he has a 1997 Dodge Cummins, and he took the cab, the bed off, and it's basically getting a full restoration. The amount of detail that he's put into this is amazing. I mean, down to the nuts and the bolts and painting the frame and just everything. It definitely captured our attention, and we're excited to have him on today. And he's going to talk to us about how he got into diesels, how he found this truck, and then what it was like just looking at a frame, a motor, from 1997 and following a vision to make it look and perform how he wanted. So he's going to talk about parts and the process and where he's going to take it in the future. So we're excited to have him on. We think you guys are going to love this episode. Well, thank you for being on the Diesel Power Podcast today, Dave. I know our listeners are going to be really excited to hear about this build. And I was just browsing on Instagram, and I saw the picture of your restoration, and I love the detailed cab-off builds, and I know our listeners will as well, so I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to chat with us. Tell us about the build.
I appreciate it, Patrick. Thanks for giving me the time. It's a true honor, actually, to get the call out like this. It's, something that I never expected or thought that would happen, but I guess when you start to do something like this and it starts out and gets involved in a project that starts to become a little bit larger than the presence you have or the life you think that you put into it, it gets a little crazy. But yeah, thanks so much.
Well, the truck's a 97, right? 97 Dodge.
Yep, 97. 3500. It's original dually, not a conversion or anything. Four-wheel drive, obviously, and original power plant of the 12 valve. So good stuff there.
Well, for our listeners out there, it's tough because we don't have a screen up with everything going. But the picture that I had seen on social media is a frame completely painted, shiny. The motor sitting there. Everything is just detailed. And I know it didn't start like that. Like, it started different with this build. What inspired you to start it, or how did you get on track to get it to this point?
Yeah, so I mean, in the beginning, I really wasn't a diesel guy per se. I was always a lifelong car enthusiast, a gas person. Had your average small block Chevy and so on and so forth. Camaros and stuff like that. But I worked for a local auto parts store, here in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and just by chance, I always had the typical run-of-the-mill guys, driving their regular trucks, their, Dodges and Fords and stuff like that. And a few folks decided to come through the store and, you purchase your parts, your exhaust, and, cold airs and whatnot. And there happened to be a younger fellow that came in that had one, and it was I believe an 05 Cummins. And, one thing led to another. He started asking him a few different questions. And at the time, he had purchased some washer fluid back and forth, and he would take a gallon outside and, dump it in his truck and come back in, grab another gallon, take it outside and dump it in his truck. And, being the average car guy, I was a little concerned, or kind of maybe thrown back there, right, Patrick, saying, what in the world could he be doing with all this washer fluid? And, he came back in, grabbed another one, went back outside, and I followed him back out. And I said, hey, bud, if you don't mind me asking, not to pry, but what's the gig here? Like, what's going on? And, he asked me at the time, and he said, have some spare time, whatever, to go for a ride? And I said, sure. So we jumped in, and the truck was a standard, and we backed out, and he took off down the road and flipped this little switch. I don't know what he was doing. I was inexperienced as to what it might have been at the time, and he just took off, and the thing was all over the road, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe the power that it had, and more so how it just took a vehicle of that size and that weight and just made it dance on the road. I mean, it was unbelievable. And, we had come back and we pulled back in around to the storefront there, and now I had a million questions. I was like, what in the world is this thing? This thing goes like, the hammers of hell. And I said, what you got to show me. I mean, you just got to tell me. I was totally intrigued, and he said, it's a, water methanol injection kit. And, the kid jumps out, pops the hood, and I'm looking at this. I didn't even know what I was looking at in the beginning. And then he started telling me about it. And after that, Patrick, I was kind of bit. I mean, the diesel bug was in for sure. And it so happens that, started looking, and I didn't know the difference between the 12-valve, 24-valve, common rail. It was all Greek to me. I didn't understand, as I see it now, it was a totally separate language, the diesel language. And I happened to run across a truck that was, like we had said before, was a 97 Dodge and dually. And it was actually a stock vehicle at the time. And it was a gentleman who owned it and that had a mason business. He was a contractor, and nothing fancy, just run of the mill. And it was pretty beat up, as far as appearance wise. I mean, it needed some serious TLC. Truck had about 187,000 on it, and he just wanted to get rid of it. So I said to him, you interested in selling it? I mean, is it something you'd want to let go for big bucks, little bucks? And he said, why don't you give me like, 60-some hundred for it? I said, I don't know too much about this. The mileage was a huge concern for me because I thought at the time, like, as a gas vehicle, wow, this is kind of crazy. What am I thinking buying a vehicle that's got almost 200,000 miles on it? But,
right.
yeah, he came down a couple $100 in the price, and, I walked away with it. And, then I was kind of hooked. I mean, it made a hell of a lot of noise and stunk and everything else, and my wife thought I was crazy, but, why would you buy something like this? And I still wanted to see what it was all about. So I read and came home and researched on the internet and started talking to different people and folks and trying not to be that guy, but ended up being, one of those guys, hey, what are you doing? What's your build like? What kind of parts do you use? And, working for an auto parts store, to have regular OE stuff at your fingertips was great. So you could look up, your brakes and how much would it cost me for a brake job, or what are your ball joints going to cost, and things like that. And as the years went by, about a year and a half or so, this was maybe 2010, and I decided, well, everybody else, let's throw a cold air intake on it and see what happens, or put an exhaust on it, and your average everyday over-the-counter parts, and it ran good. I was happy with it. I thought it was fantastic. And starting to see some of the other pieces that were out there on the internet, whether you're looking at XDP or, ATS Diesel, or all the sites that are out there for mods and what could be done with them. I never thought that the landscape for upgrades was as big as it was. It was totally mind-blowing to me. So it just started, yeah.
Especially with the Dodge or the Cummins platform, there's so much out there. It's almost like the small block Chevy world. In that there's things for, pumps and motors, transmissions. It just has a really good following. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's almost overwhelming in a sense how much aftermarket support they have from
there really is
first gens to the current ones.
You're absolutely right. I was totally blown away with it, and then trying to even express the same thought process or the idea about the truck to either family or friends, and hey, did you put a chip on it, or did you put a tuner on it? I'm like, well, I said, guys, from what I see, the only way I could explain it to them is that it's a little different. It's not like that. It's a mechanical piece. It doesn't run like that. It has like a body control module and stuff, but that's about it. And the only way I could get it through to them, and I kind of carried that same thought process was I hate to say it's the muscle car era of diesels, being the mechanical 12 valve, but you can do anything to them. They seem to be bulletproof. They're extremely durable. I think they're relatively cheap, to a degree, as compared to the 6.7s or the Duramaxes or stuff like that, even the Fords. So I was actually kind of fortunate to find the vehicle with that platform, that chassis and everything. It is an automatic, the 47 RE. Rear end is a Dana 80. Obviously, front end's a Dana 60. Extended cab, 8-foot box. So trying to find parts was kind of relatively easy. I mean, the second-gen Dodges are everywhere, and I was happy to drive it for a while, and it was, doing really well, and I figured things towards the end, another year or so passed, and I've noticed your typical Dodge fashion where, the rocker panels were starting to go, the bottom dogtails of the fenders, on the end there were starting to rust away, and I figured, well, I really like this truck. I put some money into it as far as replacement parts and, a couple, bolt-on mods here. And I figured, let's save it. I don't want to spend the money on the new one. I already have one. The chassis seemed pretty well at the time. And that's how it basically started to end up where it is today. And it kind of surprised me. And one thing just kind of snowballed and led to another where, well, if I'm going to pull the cab off or, pull the doors off, it'd be easier to take it all apart at one time. And when I thought it was going to be an easy process in the beginning, turned out to be quite a monumental process. And I don't have a workshop like an automotive garage, anything like that. It's just my dad and I really building the truck together. And, him by trade is a carpenter, so he really didn't have any mechanical background experience. And it was kind of tough sometimes. I mean, it was a real learning process, trying to figure out a totally new platform being in the diesel than it was in the gas world. I mean, mechanical concepts are the same, but, why does it have to be high pressure? What is, the pump is the whole, basically the mechanical, how can I say this? The heart behind the whole machine, really. The P pump is it. I read so much about the P pump that I went, this thing has to be unbelievable. And then I went back and saw some of the price tags on, some of the rebuilt models but then they said they're pretty durable. So I was happy about that. And, to go from one step to the other and try to find out how far do I even want to take this as, at the beginning, I didn't even call it a restoration. I just wanted to save the truck. And it just kept rolling, it just kept rolling. We had everything off and, the rears were out from underneath it. And I figured, well, I'm not just going to rattle can it. It's, let's do it. Let's take a little bit further. How bad can it be? How much did it cost to get the frame sandblasted and painted? And we took it down to a local body shop and, a guy had sandblasted it down the bare metal for me. And, regular body shop paint. Wasn't, everybody thinks that it's powder coated. It's not powder coated. It's just a regular spray gun painted, like body shop painted, epoxy painted, and it just continued to grow. And the frame came back and brought it home on a trailer, and we looked at it, and it just happened to be a nice spring day, and the sun was out. It was beautiful outside, and it was amazing. I mean, the shine that it had and the total difference in appearance from when it had left, it was horrible, rusty, greasy, dirty, dingy, the typical old-fashioned Dodge-looking, chassis. And when it came back, it was incredible. And my father looked at me, and I looked at him and said, wow, like, we can't bolt that stuff back on there. It looks terrible. It wouldn't do it any justice. So we started poking around, and, we knew the suspension had some wear and tear on it. It had some mileage on it, and I said, well, the leaf's got to have some sag in them. So next thing I know, we ended up buying a lift kit, and that took some homework. It wasn't as available as I thought it was going to be, so we ended up with a 4.5-inch BDS and, long arm kit. We bolted that on, and one thing went over to the next. We started looking for shocks, and it seemed like everybody ran Bilsteins, and I went, well, maybe there's something different out there. And I happened to catch the Fox reservoir shocks, the 2.0s, and I was really happy with those. I wasn't really too concerned. I've heard some folks say that it might have a little bit of a hard ride or, a rough ride to it. And I think the further that the build goes, Patrick, I don't really think this is going to see like a rainy day, a snowy day. I mean, I hate to call it a garage queen, but if this thing is going to see, just nice days, that's going to be the goal for it. So, and it just kept going. We figured we got the chassis rolling, and just had the stock wheels and tires at the time, and you really couldn't find a nice set of dually wheels, or tires. So I figured I'd let that sit and let's focus back to the drivetrain. So we decided, well, let's just jump on the motor and might as well do a rebuild. So I started looking to find some folks around here, local machine shops and stuff, and they were interested, but they weren't interested to the effect that I thought they were going to be. And obviously I wasn't going to get it out to, Hazley or Scheid or somebody like that. That's, a good part across the country for me. So all the machine shop guys that I ran into here were, yeah, we can do a rebuild for you, no problem. Come pick it up, maybe $1,200, $800. And I was like, oh boy. I said, I don't know. I said, it just didn't add up to me. And I said, guys, this isn't a dump truck here. We're not rebuilding a garbage truck or anything like that. I want to do a couple things to it. And so we started finding some parts, and I got online and started shopping, and ended up with a Hamilton cam in there, the 188 220, and used his total valve train from the beehive springs to the extreme duty push rods, everything. And then it just went even further. So went oversized on the pistons, went Molly pistons on it, speed manifold, ended up adding a BD twin kit, the R700s, obviously an MBRP exhaust, stainless exhaust on it, AFE intake, whole bunch of goodies, and it just kept growing and just kept going. So I figured, well, we're going to take it to the next part, and, off came the P-pump, and we sent that back to BD Diesel to have rebuilt, and they bumped that up to 700 or 600 horse for me. Went through the entire thing. I was happy with that, and it just kept growing. And every time we turned around, it was another addition or another part. And I didn't want to do the traditional black or like the Cummins beige. That's everything out there, and I wanted it to stay clean and simple. And that's kind of where the engine color kind of came up, like that, kind of like an iron gray, type look, like a battleship gray, but maybe a little lighter. And, found some different dress-up pieces. We used the BD valve covers, BD diesel valve covers, had them powder-coated. Keating Machine, I found, made the really nice front billet, timing cover for it, obviously. And then other add-on pieces like the little old push rod side cover that was there. Found that, and it just kept adding. Had some other pieces powder-coated for it. Your alternator bracket, fan pulley, anything that we thought but wouldn't be overkill. I didn't want to get too carried away with it. It would be too much. So I tried to be a little reserved and not go crazy with it, and try to keep it simple but still attractive and give it some decent contrast. So I was really blown away with how things came out. And this past summer, it was odd. I never really got into the social media thing too much until like Facebook, average, you meet your friends and stuff like that, try to stay in contact with folks. And then there was a younger gentleman I work with and said, hey, Dave, you should really think about getting this stuff out there. I mean, I'm sure, some other folks are going to want to see this. And we went to a local truck show in town. It's held by Family Events, the four-wheel off-road jamboree. And I mean, if anybody's a truck guy, they got to know the jamboree. So, they're held across the country, and ended up there and started just walking around the show and started seeing all these tags on folks' windows or stuff like that, and these stickers with the Instagram insignia there. And I said, what's everybody doing this for? Like, what's this all about? And he showed me, and he said, people are kind of proud of what they're doing. They put their build out there for folks to follow them and, just see the progression, see how they go. And I came back and had, your typical 10 guys or something like that, mostly family, and threw a couple pictures up that weren't really truck related, just everyday pictures, and just started to get some traction on it. And they grew a little further and grew a little further. And as progression went on, my project, I figured, well, we'll just put one up and see what happens. And a couple people kind of grabbed onto it and, shared it and flipped it over. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. This is pretty wild that people would take a couple minutes out of their day to say, hey, congrats, or, way to go, buddy, nice build. And even the questions that came in were surprising, because I know what it's like not to have everything at your forefront, your fingers, when you're out there. Sometimes you're kind of on an island and for information, because the stuff isn't hard to eat. It's not easy to find, right, Patrick? So
Nope.
A couple of guys asked, hey, what are you doing for valve covers, or what made you pick the color, and where did you find the list? I have a dually, or I have this, or, and it was nice to help, because I know what it's like to not be able to go in a certain direction. And obviously not knowing everything about this, I probably know just the drop in the bucket compared to a lot of other folks that are out there. But it's nice to be able to share and give some information out to guys. I'm always willing to take the time and, give my 2 cents for whatever it's worth, or anybody's even willing to listen to say, hey, what kind of rotors did you use, or where did you get this? Sometimes it wasn't even about the parts or what made you pick the parts, but even sometimes the process, like, hey, I'm stuck on something, or how did you get this far? I can't get this on, or I can't get this off. And it was nice to see, the response from different people. I mean, there's a bunch of different great, sites out there, but as far as like a repair manual, I mean, it's kind of tough. YouTube helped a lot, believe it or not.
What grabbed my attention about the build so much is, like a new truck, the challenge with a new truck, I think, is just maintaining, there's no dents, there's no scratches, there's no swirls. And that's a challenge in and of itself. But when you go back to an older truck and you have a vision for it and you want to make it look a certain way, is you have to basically start from almost scratch. And one of the things I always look for, whenever I'm at a truck show or an event or something, and I see a really clean truck, is I look at the frame. I don't know why, but I look at the frame and the axles. And when I saw your picture, that pulled me in, and then I started looking. I saw the detail on the motor, and with the lift kit, and the wheels and the tires, and just everything that goes into a build like this just pulled me in. And I know a lot of our listeners are like that as well, where they want that classic 12-valve motor. And trucks have been worked for 20 years, and sometimes even longer. And you have to start at scratch, And like you said, I have this beautiful frame. I'm not going to put the old parts back on. So then you upgrade the parts, and then, well, that's not going to put the motor back in. I can do a little, little stuff here and there, and get the compound kit and everything else. It's a fantastic build, and it was just one of those, that pulled me in. And one of the questions that was just running through my head when I saw the chassis and the motor is, what color are you going to paint the truck? Or have you decided yet?
No, yeah. I get a lot of folks that ask me, this looks great, but then what do you put on top of it? Like, where do you want to go? And
yeah,
we've had some time to think about it. I mean, to get to this point now, this summer coming up for 2017 is going to be the third year that it's sitting in the garage, that it's been off the road. So, I mean, I don't want guys to think that this happened overnight or 6 months, you do what you can do when you can do it, right? And these things are not cheap. They're not cheap vehicles, and you can't do it without, friends and family support. So, I mean, you do the best you can when you can. Probably the color, I picked out a black, obviously, to put back on it. The truck was black originally, but my father has a 15 Ram that he had purchased, and just a gas job, half ton, but he's trying, he's getting there, so I can't fault him for that. But it's a nice black, has a very light metal flake in there. I believe the name is like Midnight Graphite or something, and it really took my eye because when it was out of the sunlight, it just looked like a plain gloss black. But then when the sun rolls around and you just catch it, it has a really nice shimmer to it, just a nice shine, and the reflection from just that real fine flake that's in there. It wasn't too overdone or too heavy, but it was just enough to give it a little bit of contrast from being like a plain gloss black paint. And I figured, wow, I said that would look sharp with the the motor and the shocks and everything else. I think that would really match nice. So that's what it's going to be, stripped out, no emblems, just the lights that will be on there, the accent lights and stuff. But I'm not going to do any emblems on the truck or any striping, any body molding that they traditionally have. They have that just the side molding that goes down the doors and everything, but just a solid black. That's the plan.
I think we've got Cummins Nation salivating to be able to see some of the stuff that we've talked about on here. What's your username on Instagram?
Username is Dave's Cummins 12. Okay. It's not the catchiest thing in the world, and if I thought that it would kind of end up being a little bit more popular, I would have taken a little bit more than 5 seconds to come up with something when I was filling the account out. I mean, I know it sounds a little corny, but it just happened to be what it is.
Well, we'll make sure we put your username on there so guys can go on Instagram, or if they don't have an account, sign up. And you got to check out this build. I mean, it's one of my favorites, and we definitely want to see when you get the body on and everything's all set. We want to see some updated pictures and update all of our listeners. And it's been great to learn about your build and just what made you start it and how you've been progressing through it, and make me want to go get a 12 valve and do the same thing that you're doing.
They're definitely addicting. I will say that they're definitely addicting, and the more you do, the more you want to do, and the more it drives you crazy. So it's kind of aggravating in one, and it's satisfying in the other. But I'll tell you, when the people go out there and they give you the thumbs up, all the agony that you've had in the past kind of washes away. So I appreciate that, Patrick. That's great. I mean, the admiration is fantastic. So I just hope people enjoy it. They follow it, and they have a good time with it. Send me your questions. I mean, if you're on there and you guys see me, I'll definitely take a couple minutes to say hello and encourage whatever project you got going on.
Awesome. I think right there is where we'll end it. That'll be perfect. That's going to be a really good podcast, and I want to kind of pull these people in from Instagram to follow you and be able to give them updates. As long as I've been in this industry, the thing that grabs people the most, there's two things. It's like the 2,500 horsepower wars that they're doing now, and it's
oh my God, yeah,
the classic trucks and making them like we were going back in time to 1997, and that's
sure.
People love that. They want to see that clean, second gen Dodge, and you've done more than just make it look like a new 97. You've done a lot of upgrades to it, so I think you've definitely got a winner on your hands as far as with the people wanting to see it and grabbing attention for it. So like the guy at Rudy's mentioned, I know this could be in diesel power mag, diesel tech, diesel world. It could get
Boy, that could happen. I hope so. I mean, it'd be nice if somebody thinks about it that way. I mean, if it ends up on a cover or something like that, I mean, that's top notch there. I mean, that's the best kudos you could possibly get.